First contact in crisis. The message arrived on a Tuesday, piercing through Earth's normal background of radio chatter like a crystal bell through fog. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat bolt upright in her chair at the SETI listening post in Chile, her coffee forgotten as she stared at the readings. The signal was unlike anything humanity had ever received, structured, complex, and undeniably artificial. But it wasn't just a greeting. It was a scream for help. The Sylphids, as they called themselves, were a species of energy-based beings who had spent millennia cultivating life throughout their sector of the galaxy. They had watched humanity from afar, both fascinated and terrified by our species' ability to thrive on what they considered a death world. Now they faced an enemy they couldn't fight. The Ravagers, a nomadic species that consumed entire biospheres, leaving dead worlds in their wake. "We have observed your kind," the message continued, translated through advanced algorithms. "You who live in crushing gravity, who breathe caustic oxygen, who endure radiation that would destroy our forms. We need your strength. We need your ferocity. We need your impossible adaptability." Within hours, the message reached every major government. Admiral James Chen of the United Earth Defense Force stood before the UN Security Council, his weathered face grave as satellite footage played behind him. The images showed massive structures appearing at the edge of the solar system. Sylphid refugee ships, their crystalline forms unlike anything human engineers had conceived. "The Sylphids have provided us with detailed information about the Ravager fleet," Chen reported. "They're approximately 8 months from reaching the first inhabited world in the Sylphid Collective. Their technology is advanced, but specialized for their primary purpose, stripping planets of all organic matter to fuel their bioprocessors." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Sarah Mitchell, the Australian representative, stood. "What exactly are the Sylphids asking of us? Their message mentions our strength and ferocity, but what do they expect humanity to do against an enemy that's been consuming civilizations?" Admiral Chen's lips curved in a slight smile. "That's the interesting part. The Ravagers have never encountered a species like us. Their technology is built around processing standard gravity worlds with traditional atmospheric compositions. But humanity—" He paused, letting his words carry weight. "We've spent centuries adapting to what the galaxy considers impossible conditions. Our ships are built to withstand pressures that would crush their vessels. Our weapons operate in environments they consider lethal. They're not asking us to be saviors," Chen continued. "They're asking us to be what we've always been, survivors who thrive where others cannot. The Ravagers strip worlds by using massive gravitational fields to tear away biomass. But we were born in gravity's grip. They use atmospheric processors that would poison most species. We breathe poison for breakfast." The Chinese representative leaned forward. "You're suggesting we have a natural advantage. I'm suggesting we have every advantage they never expected to face. The Sylphids have provided us with their FTL technology in exchange for our help. They can't fight this war, but they can give us the means to reach the battlefield." Video feeds showed the first human ships approaching the Sylphid vessels. The contrast was stark. The alien ships were beautiful, delicate constructs of light and energy. Humanity's vessels were brutal, practical things, built to endure the harshest conditions space could offer. "The Ravagers have never faced a species that evolved on a death world," Chen concluded. "They've never had to fight an enemy that considers their weapons survivable conditions. They're about to learn what humanity does best, turning hostile environments into our battlefield." As the council debated, more Sylphid ships arrived, carrying with them the hopes of countless worlds. On Earth's surface, military forces began mobilizing. In orbital shipyards, engineers started adapting their designs to incorporate Sylphid FTL technology. Humanity had spent its entire existence learning to survive against a world that seemed designed to kill them. Now they would teach that lesson to the stars. The first human ships would launch within the month. Operation Starshield, they called it. Not because they planned to be defensive, but because Earth had decided. Every living world was now under humanity's protection. The Ravagers thought they were approaching helpless prey. They were about to meet the galaxy's apex predators. The War Council, the Armstrong Space Station, hummed with activity as representatives from Earth's major military powers gathered in its central chamber. Through the reinforced windows, Sylphid ships sparkled like diamond sculptures against the void, their crystalline forms a stark contrast to the utilitarian human vessels under construction below. Captain Maya Patel stood before the assembled War Council, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic display of enemy formations. 20 years in the Indian Space Force had taught her to find patterns in chaos, and the Ravagers' movements told a clear story. They're not just hunters, she explained, manipulating the display with practiced gestures. They're farmers. Look at their pattern of consumption. They leave precisely calculated gaps between harvested systems, allowing life to regenerate before their next pass. They're cultivating the galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded from his position at the head of the table. And we're about to disrupt their harvest rotation. Our Sylphid allies have provided detailed scans of Ravager biology. Dr. Harrison, your analysis. Dr. Sarah Harrison, head of Xenobiology at Oxford, stepped forward. Her presentation showed cross-sections of captured Ravager tissue samples. They're silicon-based life forms, evolved to process organic matter into energy. Their entire civilization is built around this biological imperative. But here's what makes them vulnerable. They've adapted to easily digestible biomass from standard gravity worlds. She highlighted specific cellular structures. Their digestive processes would struggle with Earth life forms. Our cells evolved under intense pressure, leading to denser molecular structures. We're literally too tough for them to process efficiently. Even our plant life would be like trying to eat rocks. General Viktor Petrov of the Eurasian Defense Force leaned forward. So we're indigestible. How does this help us fight them? The next speaker was Commander John Martinez, whose special operations background showed in his scared face and calculating gaze. Because we can turn their feeding grounds into death traps. He pulled up schematics of modified cargo ships. We've been developing biological warfare options, not viruses or bacteria. They're too alien for those to work. Instead, we load ships with Earth's most aggressive invasive species, plants that can crack concrete, fungi that eat radiation, bacteria that thrive in acid. We seed their farming grounds with life they can't process, Paddle continued, while simultaneously hitting their fleets with weapons they never designed defenses against. Their ships use gravity manipulation. Ours are built to withstand forces that would tear their vessels apart. They depend on atmospheric processors. We'll fight them in environments that would kill most species. The Sylphid Ambassador, a being of pure energy contained within a specialized field generator, pulsed with what their translators interpreted as hope. Your strategy is unprecedented. Our species spent millennia cultivating harmony. We never considered using life itself as a weapon. That's because you evolved in a gentle world, Chen replied. Earth taught us different lessons. Every species on our planet learned to fight, adapt, or die. Now we'll teach those lessons to the Ravagers. The planning continued through Earth's night cycle. Engineers adapted ship designs to incorporate Sylphid FTL technology while maintaining their brutal durability. Biologists prepared samples of Earth's most resilient life forms. Military strategists developed tactics that would have been suicidal for any other species, but were perfectly suited to humanity's unique capabilities. In orbit, the first wave of modified ships neared completion. They weren't beautiful like the Sylphid vessels. They were fortress ships, built to endure conditions that the enemy considered impossible to survive. Their hulls were layered with ablative armor that could withstand gravitational forces that would implode most vessels. Their weapons were designed to function in environments that would corrode standard technology. The Ravagers think they're approaching another easy harvest. Chen addressed the council as the session concluded. Instead, they're about to face something they've never encountered. A species that evolved on a world more hostile than anything they use as a weapon. We don't need to outfight them. We just need to outlast them in environments they consider lethal. Maya Patel studied the deployment plans one final time. Humanity would divide their forces into 3 fleets. The Shield Fleet would evacuate vulnerable populations from threatened worlds. The Sword Fleet would engage the Ravagers directly. And the Shadow Fleet, her command, would seed Earth life throughout Ravager territory, turning their own farming strategy against them. As the council dispersed, the Sylphid ambassador approached Chen. Its energy form flickered with complex patterns that the translators struggled to convey. We watched your species for centuries, frightened by your aggressive development and constant conflicts. Now we understand. You weren't fighting each other. You were preparing for this moment. Your entire history has been training for a war against an enemy that thinks the very conditions of your existence are weapons. Chen watched as another human dreadnought moved into position, its massive form reflecting the light of Earth's sun. We've spent our entire existence learning to survive in conditions that should have killed us. Time to share that experience with the galaxy. The War Council had ended. The next phase would begin within days. Humanity's first interstellar war wouldn't be fought with overwhelming technology or superior numbers. It would be fought with the lessons learned from billions of years of evolution on a world that had tried its best to kill them. The Ravagers were about to learn why the galaxy's other species called Earth a death world. Operation Starshield. The bridge of the UES Hyperion hummed with tension as Commander Sarah Chen watched the tactical display. The massive dreadnought led humanity's first combat fleet into what would become known as the Battle of Proxima Centauri. It wasn't their solar system they were defending. The Sylphids had provided coordinates to a world about to face harvesting. Ravager vessels detected. Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from her sensor station. 5 Harvester-class ships approaching the colony world. They're deploying their gravity weapons. Chen watched as the enemy ships began their standard harvest procedure. The Ravagers' massive vessels were organic mechanical hybrids, their hulls grown rather than built, optimized for their single purpose, stripping worlds of life. They never expected resistance. They'd never needed to. All ships, execute Operation Starshield. Chen commanded. Remember your training. These conditions are what we were born for. The human fleet split into its predetermined attack formations. The Hyperion led the main assault group, while smaller Wolfpack squadrons moved to flank positions. The Ravager ships detected them, but showed no signs of concern. Their scans would show vessels that seemed primitive compared to their own biotechnology. That illusion lasted until the first shots were fired. The Hyperion's main gun launched a projectile at speeds that would have torn apart most ships. The round was simple. A tungsten rod wrapped in layers of Earth's densest materials. When it hit the lead Ravager vessel's gravitational field, something unprecedented happened. Instead of being crushed by the defensive screen, the projectile's specially designed mass actually gained energy from the gravitational weapon. It punched through the field and slammed into the organic hull with the force of a small nuclear weapon. Direct hit. Rodriguez called out. Enemy vessel showing signs of severe structural damage. Their gravity weapon is destabilizing. The Ravager ship's response was immediate and devastating. It turned its harvesting beam directly on the human fleet. The energy beam that could strip a planet's surface bare engulfed the Hyperion. And nothing happened. Hull integrity at 98%, reported engineering. The ablative armor is holding. Temperature increase minimal. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Now they understand. Return fire, all batteries. Show them what Deathworlders can do. The battle erupted into chaos. The Ravager ships tried to employ weapons designed to tear apart standard gravity vessels, only to find their targets stubbornly refusing to follow the laws of physics as they understood them. Human ships pushed through gravitational forces that should have crushed them, their engines and hulls designed for conditions far more extreme than anything the Ravagers could generate. But it wasn't just about surviving the enemy's weapons. Humanity's counterattack demonstrated just how thoroughly they had prepared. Specialized missiles carried payloads of Earth's most corrosive bacteria. designed to eat through the organic components of Ravager ships. Electronic warfare suites, built to function in solar radiation that would fry normal systems, tore through biomechanical defenses. Enemy fleet is breaking formation, Rodriguez reported. 2 vessels showing critical damage to their organic components. They're attempting to retreat. Not today, Chen responded. Launch the boarding pods. This was the moment that would truly demonstrate humanity's advantage. Pods launched from the Hyperion's flanks, carrying teams of Marines in sealed combat suits. The Ravagers had never developed personal combat capabilities. They'd never needed to fight boarding actions. Their ships were defended by automated systems and hostile environments. Unfortunately for them, hostile environments were humanity's specialty. The Marine teams breached the damaged Ravager vessels, fighting through corridors filled with caustic atmosphere and crushing gravity. Their suits, designed for deep space repair work in the heart of gas giants, shrugged off conditions that would have killed any other species. First team has reached their biological control center, came the report. Second team securing the engineering section. These ships, they're not just vessels. They're grown. The whole thing is alive. And now they're learning what happens when you corner life from a death world. Chen responded. Plant the packages and withdraw. The packages were another innovation of human warfare. Colonies of Earth extremophile bacteria, specifically engineered to target the organic components of Ravager biotechnology. They would spread through the ship's living systems like a cancer, rendering the vessels useless even if they escaped. As the Marines withdrew, the remaining Ravager ships attempted a desperate gambit. They combined their gravitational weapons, creating a field so intense it began to warp space itself. Warning alerts blared across the Hyperion's bridge. All hands, brace for extreme gravitational stress, Chen ordered. The human ship's artificial gravity systems, designed for operations near black holes, strained against forces that would have torn any other fleet to atoms. The Hyperion's hull creaked and groaned, but held. When the gravitational storm cleared, the Ravager ships had vanished into FTL. But they left behind 2 crippled vessels, their organic systems already being devoured by Earth bacteria. Secure those ships, Chen ordered. I want every piece of their technology studied. And send word to command. Operation Starshield was a success. We've proven that humanity can not only fight the Ravagers, we can beat them. As recovery teams moved to secure the derelict vessels, Chen studied the tactical display. This was just the first battle, but it had proven their theory correct. The Ravagers had spent millennia evolving to prey on worlds and species that followed standard environmental rules. They had never encountered a species that considered their weapons to be mild inconveniences. The captured ships would provide valuable intelligence, but they had already learned the most important lesson. The Ravagers could be beaten. Humanity's primitive technology, designed to function in conditions that most species considered impossible, had proven superior to the Ravagers' specialized biological weapons. The war was far from over, but the galaxy's apex predators had just learned an important lesson about challenging Deathworlders in their own game. As Chen prepared her report for command, she couldn't help but wonder how the Ravagers would adapt to this new threat. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to treat lethal conditions as merely another day at the office. The turning point. Dr. Elena Martinez stood in the converted cargo bay of the UES Hyperion, studying the pulsing organic matter extracted from the captured Ravager vessels. 3 months had passed since humanity's first victory, and the war had evolved into a deadly game of adaptation and counter-adaptation. Look at how it responds to the electrical stimulation, she told Admiral Chen, who had come to inspect their findings personally. The tissue sample writhed under the controlled current, its cellular structure visibly reorganizing. They're not just biological, they're programmable on a genetic level. Each defeat teaches them, and they pass those lessons through their network. The Ravagers had proven to be more adaptable than anyone expected. After their initial defeats, they had begun modifying their ships to better withstand human weapons. Their gravity weapons had been recalibrated, their organic hulls reinforced. But that adaptation had come at a cost, one that humanity was about to exploit. They're burning through resources faster than ever. Martinez continued, pulling up comparative scans. These modifications require enormous amounts of energy. They're having to harvest more worlds just to maintain their current fleet strength. Chen's eyes narrowed. They're desperate. That's why they're pushing harder into Sylphid space, even with our forces opposing them. They need the biomass. The lab's doors hissed open as Maya Patil entered, her shadow fleet having just returned from its latest mission. "Then you're going to love what we found," she said, transferring data to the main display. "We've been tracking their harvest patterns, and there's something they're not telling their own ships." The display showed a map of Ravager territory, with certain systems marked in red. "These are worlds they've recently stripped," Patil explained. "But look at the bacterial samples we collected. The Earth extremophiles we seeded. They're not just surviving on these worlds. They're thriving. They're breaking down the very compounds the Ravagers need for their biotech." Martinez's eyes widened as she processed the implications. "We're not just fighting them. We're starving them." "Exactly," Patil confirmed. "Every world we seed with Earth life becomes less valuable to them. The bacteria convert the biomass into forms they can't process. We're turning their farming grounds into wastelands, at least from their perspective." A soft chime announced the arrival of the Sylphid ambassador, its energy form more focused than usual. "We have observed something remarkable on the worlds you've defended," it communicated through the translator. "The indigenous life forms are changing, adapting. Your Earth bacteria aren't just destroying Ravager food sources, they're sharing genetic material with local species." Martinez quickly pulled up data from protected worlds. The ambassador was right. Wherever Earth life had been introduced, local organisms were showing unprecedented rates of evolution. They were becoming harder, denser, more resilient. More like Earth life. "We're not just defending these worlds," she breathed. "We're teaching them to defend themselves." Chen absorbed this information with the calculated focus of a military commander. How long until the Ravagers run out of viable harvest worlds? At their current consumption rate, and with our seeding program. Patil consulted her data. 6 months, maybe less. They'll have to either retreat to their core territories or commit everything to one final push. Chen finished. "They're cornered predators now. And we all know how dangerous that can be." As if in response to his words, emergency alerts blared throughout the ship. The tactical display shifted to show massive Ravager fleet movements. Hundreds of ships, far more than they'd ever committed to a single action, were converging on the Sylphid homeworld. "They're not trying to harvest it," Patil realized, studying the formations. "Those are war formations. They're going to destroy it completely. Remove the Sylphid's ability to coordinate resistance." The ambassador's energy form flickered with what they had learned to recognize as determination. "Then we will finally do what we should have done millennia ago. We will fight." The translator struggled to convey the complexity of its next words. "Our worlds have been learning from your example. Not just the life forms, but our people. We have watched how you face impossible odds, how you turn hostile environments into advantages. We are ready to stop being only observers." Chen studied the tactical display, already formulating plans. "You're sure about this? Your people have never engaged in direct combat." "The universe is change," the ambassador replied. "You taught us that merely surviving is not enough. Sometimes one must adapt or die. We have chosen to adapt." Around them, the Hyperion's crew rushed to battle stations. The largest fleet battle in human history was about to begin, and this time they wouldn't be fighting alone. The Sylphids, inspired by humanity's example, had developed their own weapons, ones that used their natural energy manipulation abilities in ways the Ravagers couldn't predict. "Send word to all fleets," Chen ordered. "The Ravagers think they're launching a decisive strike. Instead, they're walking into a trap generations in the making. Every world they've stripped Every species they've consumed has led them to this moment. They're about to face not just humanity, but every species they thought too weak to fight back. As the Hyperion's engines powered up, Martinez watched the tissue sample continuing its futile attempts to adapt. The Ravagers had spent too long being the galaxy's apex predators. They'd forgotten the most fundamental law of nature: adapt or die. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Victory's price. The space around the Sylphid homeworld erupted into a light show that would have blinded unshielded eyes. The combined Ravager fleet, nearly 1,000 ships strong, emerged from FTL in an attack formation that spoke of both desperation and deadly purpose. Their organic hulls had been modified past all recognition, stripped down and rebuilt for pure combat rather than harvest operations. Admiral Chen stood on the Hyperion's bridge, watching as humanity's forces took position alongside their allies. The Sylphid ships no longer looked like delicate crystal sculptures. They had adapted, just as the humans had taught them, becoming living weapons of focused energy and determination. All ships report ready, Commander Patil announced from her tactical station. Shadow Fleet is in position behind the Ravager lines. Earth bacteria payload is primed for deployment. The Ravager fleet's opening move was both brilliant and terrifying. Their ships linked together, forming massive organic superstructures that channeled their gravitational weapons into concentrated beams of space-time warping energy. The attack would have torn apart any normal fleet, but humanity had long since moved beyond normal. Execute Operation Thunderbolt, Chen ordered. The human fleet split into its component battle groups, each ship activating the experimental drives that Dr. Martinez's team had developed. Based on their study of Ravager biotechnology, the drives created localized pockets of hyperdense space, turning the enemy's gravitational attacks into propulsion systems. The Hyperion led the charge, its hull groaning as it accelerated to speeds that should have torn it apart. Behind it, the rest of humanity's fleet followed, riding the waves of warped space like surfers on a tsunami. The Ravager's first wave of attacks didn't destroy the human fleet. It catapulted them directly into firing range. All ships, deploy infiltration packages, Patil commanded. Thousands of tiny pods launched from the human vessels, each containing a specially engineered strain of Earth bacteria designed to target the Ravager's organic technology. The enemy's gravity weapons, so focused on stopping large ships, let these microscopic warriors slip right through. But the true surprise came from the Sylphids. Their ships, previously thought incapable of offensive action, transformed into beings of pure energy. They phased through the Ravager's defenses as if they didn't exist, their very essence now weaponized to disrupt the enemy's bioelectric systems. They did it, Dr. Martins whispered from her station, monitoring the battle's biological aspects. The Sylphids didn't just learn to fight. They evolved an entirely new form of warfare. The battle became a symphony of destruction and adaptation. Every time the Ravagers adjusted their tactics, they found themselves facing enemies who had already prepared for the change. Shadow Fleet struck from behind, seeding captured worlds with life forms that would make them forever useless to the Ravagers. The Sylphids phased through shields and hulls, disrupting organic systems faster than they could regenerate. And humanity's fleet, built to endure conditions that would kill most species, proved that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. While the Ravagers spent energy on elaborate biotech weapons, human ships simply rammed through their defenses, protected by armor designed to withstand the heart of a gas giant. The turning point came 3 hours into the battle. The bacterial weapons had spread through the linked Ravager ships like a plague, turning their greatest strength, their interconnected nature, into a fatal weakness. Their organic hulls began to dissolve, their weapons losing coherence as the very material they were made from rebelled against them. Enemy fleet is displaying signs of cellular breakdown, Martins reported. The adaptation process has failed. They're trying to separate their ships, but the infection has spread too far. The Ravager fleet's formation collapsed into chaos. Some ships attempted to flee, only to find the Shadow Fleet waiting in their escape routes. Others tried to fight on, but their weapons were literally dissolving in space. The few that attempted to self-destruct found that even their death throes had been anticipated and countered. Ravager flagship is transmitting, Patil announced. They're requesting communication. For the first time in recorded history, the Ravagers spoke not as conquerors, but as a defeated force. Their transmission carried something no species had ever heard from them before. Fear. You have done the impossible. The Ravager leader's translated message echoed across the bridge. You have turned life itself against us. Our worlds are becoming poison to us. Our food turns to ash in our grass. How? How did you destroy us without destroying a single world? Chen's response was measured, delivered with the weight of a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for this moment without knowing it. We didn't destroy you. We simply showed the galaxy how to survive. You spent millennia consuming worlds. We spent millennia learning to live in harmony with the harshest conditions imaginable. That's the difference between us. You see hostile environments as weapons. We see them as challenges to overcome. The aftermath of the battle would reshape galactic society. The Ravagers, their fleet in ruins and their feeding grounds transformed by Earth bacteria, retreated to their core worlds. But they didn't die out. Instead, faced with the choice to adapt or perish, they began the long process of learning to synthesize their nutritional needs rather than consuming whole worlds. The sylphids, changed forever by the conflict, emerged as a new kind of species, one that balanced their nurturing nature with the strength to defend it. Their worlds, touched by Earth life, developed ecosystems more resilient than ever before. And humanity. They had proven themselves to be something unique in the galaxy, not just warriors or survivors, but teachers. Their gift to the galaxy wasn't just victory in a war, but the lesson that had forged their species, the power to adapt, to survive, and to thrive in conditions that should have been impossible. As the Hyperion led the fleet home, Chen looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity had been called Deathworlders, had been feared for their ability to survive in hostile conditions. Now they were known by a new title, Guardians, not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they could teach others to be strong. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed.